Hey, and good Tuesday morning, everybody. Meteorologist Greg Majeski back with you here on the Weather Nerds YouTube channel here on your September the 30th, 2025. Your no-nonsense weather without all that hype. Appreciate you checking in here for this morning. Hope you're having a great day, and we'll get you underway here and get you all prepared to what you're going to have to expect here for this upcoming weekend. One of the themes I wanted to hit on here for this report is the fact that really starting to see indications with the overall weather pattern of what we call a truly La Nina pattern setting up. It's going to set up some forecast challenges, especially with any kind of cold air intrusions, where the warm air is going to set up. It may also set up an opportunity for an active severe weather season, I think, going more into fall, like going into late October, going to November, I think, potentially there. But what we got to deal with for today is we got to get rid of these two tropical systems off the East Coast. We're going to clear those out. We're going to deal with a wedge on the East Coast, very warm weather in the middle of the country, and then we'll talk about maybe some changes for next week. Now, before we kind of get into all of this for you guys here today, if you're not a subscriber, I would appreciate your help as we try to grow a no-nonsense weather channel here without all that social media, YouTube hype. God knows there's enough of it out there for you. So let me put my experience to work for you. If you please consider hitting that subscribe button, I would appreciate you guys helping the channel out here. All right, let's go ahead and talk about what we got to see out there. Let's get this thing out of studio mode here so I can do a little bit of illustrating, shall we say here, as we're going to be dealing with, again, these two systems off the coast. Now, one thing I'm noticing here with Umberto, it's starting to lose a little bit of its tropical characteristics here. This is going to loop around Bermuda, not an issue. We do have Imelda now, officially a hurricane as of the 8 o'clock advisory now. It's definitely spreading a cloud field all the way up the eastern seaboard here. That's something like 1,200 to 1,300 miles from the center. It's just kind of throwing some Atlantic moisture over the old frontal boundary that's in there. But these are going to be clearing on out of here over the next day or so. And in its wake along the East Coast, it's going to be looking pretty nice indeed, especially you guys across the southeast out there. Here's your forecast mapping. We got another storm system out here on the west coast. We have one that kind of moved inland. We got another one behind this one. So it's getting some pretty good, decent rains here out in the west and some of the intermountain region out here. We're also going to be talking some snows on this report. Yeah, some pretty decent ones there coming into Wyoming potentially going to the next week. Yeah, stick around for those. Then you got to kind of see the wet weather here up and down the eastern seaboard. And some of these little outer bands are kind of working their way in just off the Carolina coast there. We'll go into Radar Omega here. We'll take a look at that real quick there. You see some of those outer bands just off of Myrtle Beach and Charleston. I tell you, the rip currents are going to be a problem. Wave heights. I saw yesterday a report. It was like, I think 80-foot seas between the two storms. It was just massive. And you got that much wind energy out there, especially with two storm systems out there causing a lot of problems. So we're going to have rip currents all the way up from the Jersey Shore all the way down into Florida. They should start to settle down, though, a little bit later this week. So just be careful if anybody's heading out to those beaches for any reason. Now, here's your national watch this morning. Again, pretty quiet out there for the most part. We got some wind advisories out here in the west, but not looking all that bad. And, you know, October traditionally is one of our quieter months as far as rainfall and storm systems. As we're making that transition, you know, getting into that fall season. And not a whole lot going on right now. All right, so let's go ahead and break down. Let's look at the tropics. Let's get into this right there. Again, there's our two storms, two hurricanes. Got dueling hurricanes. That's how I was teasing it last week. And thank goodness for Umberto, because if it wasn't for Umberto to yank Imelda off, this thing probably would have done a little loop and come right back into the Carolinas, into the southeast, and may have parked itself there for a little while. Could have been a real flooding nightmare with that system. But thank goodness for Umberto came along and going to yank Imelda on out to sea, so we don't have to worry about that. So here is Umberto's stats. Again, top winds at 100 miles per hour, moving northwest at 17. Here's the island of Bermuda. They did cancel all flights out there, but not so much for Umberto. It's going to be for Imelda, which is going to go right over the island there. That's going to be a big headache for those guys, as this thing's going to go right over. They do have hurricane watches up for the island of Bermuda right there. And as you can see, this thing's going to race off this way. May get up close to, up to 100 mile per hour winds potentially. Maybe get up to Cat 2 as it gets near the island of Bermuda, and then kind of move on out into the open Atlantic. Goodbye and good riddance to those two hurricanes there. And as far as anything else behind here, got a tropical wave out here in the middle of the Atlantic. Again, here's our storm systems up here. The Gulf is looking quiet. The Caribbean is looking pretty quiet right now. And one thing I've noticed here for the first time in a long time, I don't see a whole lot of dust out here for a change. That was one of the inhibiting factors of the hurricane season this year, is the fact that we've had a lot of Saharan dust out there, and I don't see any out there right now. But I will tell you this much. If we don't start getting something to develop here probably in the next couple of weeks, not to say we might not see a tropical storm, but it gets harder to get a major a hurricane to make a strike across the United States, specifically because wind shear comes up, water start cooling off. Florida is probably the last place that maybe get something late season. But as far as like East Coast and that kind of stuff, it just gets a little more difficult. Now, last time we went a season without a landfalling tropical system was in 2015. So it's been about 10 years since we've had that. But we still got a little bit of season ahead. We'll see what happens here for the remainder of the season. Now, here's the East Ends ensemble model here. Again, we're saying goodbye to our two systems heading on out of here. Probably need to change the color of this thing because it's blending in with all that pink out there. But we're going to kind of keep a watchful eye on see if anything, any of these little disturbances out here set up anything. Nothing that's concentrated, so nothing really stands out for me just yet. But just a reminder, we're not quite done with the hurricane season yet. Here is the chart right now. Again, we're going to start October 1st for tomorrow, so we're right about in here. So we still got this downward trend here for the rest of the hurricane season to watch. So stay tuned. We'll keep you updated on anything should it materialize. Right now, not looking too bad as we're dealing with the developing La Nina. Again, that's what I wanted to kind of hit on here on this report is the fact that we've got a fairly strong La Nina is forecast to peak here going into October and then start a slow downward trend going toward November, December. It kind of gets more into a neutral phase. But what I'm seeing developing here with the overall weather pattern across the country is a typical La Nina pattern, which basically means an active northern track. The south stays warm and dry on the mild side. And what's going to be difficult is when these cold air intrusions come in, which one's going to punch through and which ones aren't. That's going to be a challenge. Also, with increased warmth in the south and the fact that the Gulf is pretty warm as well as far as moisture vapor, you're still looking at a heavy rain threat there. And I think we might see a more active severe weather season potentially going in toward November. We'll see, but I think that's in the cards for right now. All right, now as far as the Pacific, with the La Nina developing out there, typically what happens out there is activity starts to settle down here in the Pacific. Right now we've got one air disturbed weather showing a 60% chance for development. We got tropical depression 15 out there. But otherwise, it's really not looking all that impressive out there for the moment. Again, here's our tropical depression out there. Not seeing a whole lot out there for right now that really kind of stands out. So usually when the La Nina starts to build, the Pacific starts to settle down here a little bit. Now, one thing I do want to point out, there's something I have not seen in a very long time here, is looking at your thunderstorm threat here for the next 3 days. There's no severe weather out there. It's pretty cool. We got a general thunderstorm threat here across the country here for the next 3 days, but nothing significant. It's going to stay quiet here, folks. Really not going to see anything here for Monday, Tuesday, for Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Looking all quiet out there. My app just kind of locked up on me. But trust me, just let me know. There's not any imminent severe weather out there for the next 3 days. So I'll reboot weather-wise later, but just take my word, just a general thunderstorm threat is what we're going to be seeing here across the nation. All right, so let's go ahead and get into our model data here. Let's go take a look at these here as we're going to get you ready here for the next couple of days. We're going to first focus here on the intermediate model. Okay, we're going to be looking at, again, the NAM here. It's going to take us into your Thursday afternoon. And the one thing we're going to be seeing here across the east is we're going to see a big area of high pressure. It's going to kind of anchor itself here across New England and bring a nice cool air wedge on the backside of those hurricanes retreating on out. Of course, we got some active weather out here on the west coast as well, with the onshore flow coming in there with the next storm system that may dump some pretty good snows here across Wyoming going into next week. But again, the middle of the country is going to be the big story there, with some very warm weather, still looking at temperatures well above normal. That's going to hold on here at least into the weekend. Then we might see some changes going into next week. I'm going to show you the European model on that here to illustrate that change coming. All right. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the rainfall totals here. Again, we get a little bit here across the southeast, thanks to that moisture from Imelda being thrown up here. Northeast looking fairly quiet. We get some rains here across the Intermountain region, some pretty good heavy rains up here across the Pacific Northwest. In California, getting some rains. That's not a bad thing to see. Starting to get an early season on the rain out there. But the middle of the country, not seeing a whole lot. Again, this takes you through October the 2nd at 2 o'clock for the next 60 hours. So that's what we're seeing for the moment for the rest, getting toward the end of this week. All right, here's the temperature thing. Again, the big story's got to be this for the next couple of days, the fact that it's just going to stay so warm here in the middle of the country. We're not talking excessive summer-like heat, but at least temperatures running well into the 80s here. We've got a little bit of cool air across areas of the northeast, which is going to work its way down here across the Appalachians thanks to the cold air damming event setting up there. but really no real significant cold air on the short range model. Okay, going in here, the intermediate model, I should call it. It's not really short range, intermediate, taking us out toward Thursday. All right, so as we go ahead and take a look at the overall pattern here, I want to shake this. This is European. I was explaining the fact that this thing's starting to shape up to be almost like a typical La Nina type pattern that's setting up here across the country. So, and the reason why I say that is because we start getting these intrusions start to come down. We're seeing the more active northern jet kind of come in here. And you notice this here where we got this like this ridging, this high pressure across the southeast where it's kind of holding on. So one of the forecast challenges on this is like, okay, when these cold fronts come down, how far south do they go? Do they really get into the southeast, or does it stay warm on that? And then, of course, depending on the position of the jet stream, this one's not looking too bad. Again, you might be looking at some active severe weather that may come in here. I'm not seeing it imminent right now, but as we go into later into the fall, that definitely looks like this, like right there, looks like some pretty decent rains and thunderstorms for me going into the following weekend into the northeast. Again, this is a long-range trend here. So again, you see a lot of orange over the country, but we see a lot more blue. That means low pressure. That means storm systems starts to get a little more active here as we go toward the 13th. Now, the Climate Outlook Center still has not really shown any significant changes in their forecast yet, but we'll see what the afternoon runs do here on the European model, see if that kind of comes to fruition or not. Okay, so here's the next 7 days as far as the forecast. We're going to get a little wet here across the southeast. Yes, we're going to bring in some snows into the Intermountain region. Watch this storm system here on the west coast here, kind of move on in here across Washington State. We're going to bring it inland here, and we're going to look at like some snows up there across Wyoming going into this upcoming weekend. So we're going to get some snows in the higher elevations there. We're also going to look at some moisture influxing here across the southeast. We're going to get some rains here. Here's our cold front coming on in. This is going to beat back the heat here going into Monday next week. So the high plains will cool off a bit, unlike the 80-degree temperatures they're kind of seeing out there for today, for example. So that front's going to move off the east. But again, with that ridging taking place in the southeast, I don't think it's going to push the south. It just kind of lays flat. It just kind of lays out flat there as this moves on in. So you got this, it kind of does this number. We're not going to be able to bump into this, although we are going to see increased precipitation for next week across the southeast. We could use some more rain. We're still dealing with some drought conditions here across the southeast. All right, so let's go and take a look at those rainfall chances here. Again, we're going to pick it up here across the southeast a little bit. Here's our storm system that's up here, seeing some decent rains up across areas of Minnesota, stretching back into Wyoming. Again, some of that's going to be some snow. Some pretty good heavy rains out here on the west coast as well. Northeast looks dry. Southwest is looking pretty much dry. Again, this is a 7-day total taking you into next Tuesday. I don't like extrapolating beyond that because it's really kind of speculation at that point. All right, so that's our trend here for the next 7 days. All right, and again, talking of snows, again, this is going into next week. Look, higher elevation snows, 6-7 inches of snow, 7 inches of snow showing up there, 5 inches of snow. So we're getting a little bit of snow here. Utah, also in the higher elevations in Colorado as well. So we got a little snow finally coming on there. I like the fact that I get to start tracking some snow now in that forecast. That's pretty cool. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the temperatures here. Again, we're talking about a front coming on down here. So let me slow this thing down here for you again. Look at 80-degree temperatures here on Wednesday afternoon, all the way up here into areas of North South Dakota. That's way above normal for this time of year. This should be really cooling off as we're getting ready to flip into October. So still some 90s down there across Texas here. Again, but it's going to stay warm in the middle of the country right through Thursday, right through Friday. See how warm it is here in the morning. Here's that cool air wedge coming down the eastern half of the Appalachians going into Friday morning. Got 50s coming down into Georgia, some 40s into the Cumberland area, looking very nice, cool here across, 40s across the northeast. So there's our quick cool down wedge there, but very warm in the middle of the country. Definitely colder out in the west. Now, as we go through the weekend, all right, still warm. Here's Friday afternoon, still warm there in the middle of the country, still showing 80s. We're going to start chipping this away. Here comes that front. Look at that. Oh, we got a cold front. Check that out. Going into Sunday, we got a cold front here coming on in. All right, but look how warm it is. We got temperatures here well into the 80s up ahead of this. 84 near Chicago. I mean, that's pretty warm for this time of year. And that's going to stay warm going into Sunday, but that front's going to move off toward the east. Here it goes. Look at it start. Yeah, very nice, sharp dive. Look at that. Look at that. Very sharp. We got some cold air. Look at it. That's why we're expecting the snows. You see in the 20s and 30s out there. First time I'm seeing that significant of a cool down there. A warm out ahead of that front. But again, you guys in the southeast, I don't think it's pumping through, at least not this time, not this one. This one's going to kind of lay on out and it'll move on off to the east there. So I'll just kind of stop it to right about there. So again, you can kind of see next Tuesday, we got a cool down coming in here. All right, so cooler here, but staying warm here. Now, the long-range forecast models are not reflecting this, okay? The Climate Outlook Center, they are showing cooler weather out in the west for the 6 to 10 day outlook, but not really showing it up across the Great Lakes yet. So again, we'll see if we see any slight modifications in that climate outlook going into next week. So let's look at that climate outlook here. We'll get you looking. You'll see what I'm talking about here. Look how much of the country here next week. This is through the 5th to the 9th. We're seeing below normal temperatures out here in the west, so it's cool here, warm here. But do we chip this away a little bit? Again, you saw the European kind of bringing that cold front off to the east here a little bit. So maybe this gets modified just a little bit. We'll see. But again, it doesn't really push it much. This goes again from the 7th to the 13th. So not going to see any significant cool down there. But there might be a couple of shots to watch. So we'll see if this gets modified later today. Above normal precipitation, again, we're seeing a little more active flow here with a couple of storm systems here in the middle of the country. Southeast, obviously, with that low there coming in off the Atlantic, showing a little bit more moisture there going in toward the early portion of next week. And then looks like we continue with a fairly wet pattern for a lot of the country. Again, this going from the 7th through the 13th. So that's how it's looking right now. So again, I really wanted to hit on this again, the fact that we're getting into the fall season. The Southeast, I think, is going to predominantly stay dry here as I really start to see the indications of a true La Nina pattern starting to shape up here across the Southeast. Active storm front to the north. I think as we go later in the month of October, going into November, we'll have to watch for that second severe weather season potentially going to be there. And really looking ahead for the winter season, I'm actually starting to work on my winter outlook here. I think it's going to be one of extremes. I really do. And when I say that, there's going to be bouts of very warm weather and bouts of very cold weather, depending on where you're at. And because of that, because we got a weakening La Nina, we've got very warm waters in the northern Pacific, which typically means we're going to have a pretty Arctic, pretty cold weather across the northern tier. And then the fact that the polar vortex, the jet stream right now, as far as stratospheric warming, is considered to be weak. So that means more cold air intrusions, that polar vortex coming on down. So we got competing forecasts. La Nina, polar vortex. It's going to be one. I think it's just going to be a winter of extremes. That's why I think it's going to be one or the other, feast or famine, depending on where you're at this winter. All right, that's y'all's update for today. Again, appreciate you guys checking out. Good morning, Rita. Good to see you out there for this morning. And again, we're going to start doing some advertising again here on YouTube here pretty soon to get this going again. The rebrand coming in October. I will be rebranding this to Majestic Weather. It's going to be rebranded, but not changing anything here. Just going to do the rebrand here, and we'll start to little advertising money. We'll start here pretty soon, probably about like $100. Just kind of push it a little bit. As we got to show the YouTube algorithm a little love. The YouTube algorithm has pretty much dropped us off right now. So we got to start showing it a little more love, and hopefully we can start growing the channel a little bit. All right, that's it for now. You guys take it easy, be good, stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow on the next update. You guys, until then, have a great day. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.